Yes, I've been away for some time, but I'm back.
And we're back.
No, I'm back. Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna have to talk fast in this one to maintain my breezy 10 to 14 minute runtime for an episode of the show. There's kind of a lot to get through here. The World's End is one of my favorite movies ever made. It might, in fact, be my favorite movie ever made. While strong praise on its own, I feel the need to list some of my other favorite movies to illustrate where this sits with me. Ghostbusters, Kingdom of Heaven, the Director's Cut, Saving Private Ryan, Whale Rider, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, LA Confidential, In America, Vertigo, Annie Hall, A Very Long Engagement, Die Hard, Inception, Seven, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That it might actually sit at the top of that list should offer the necessary way to understand where I'm coming from. That is not an invitation to tell me how stupid I am in the comments. That is not how constructive discourse really works. Hear me out on it, and in the very likely scenario that you still disagree with me, let's agree to support each other for the art we enjoy and just relate to the stuff we like is diverse. You know, put some happiness back out in that world. If you've ever checked out the Chainsaw Suit podcast with Chris and Mikey, then you're aware that I make no secret that Edgar Wright is my favorite director working today. To give you a quick recap, he made 4 films, 3 in the Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End, with an adaptation of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World in the middle for good measure, which is ignoring the genius of the BBC show Spaced, so do yourself a favor and check it out as well. I'll wait here for you to fit
Clockwork to Netflix.
So what is it that makes me think this movie is so great? Well, if you were at all familiar with the films I listed a minute ago, then you're probably aware that I enjoy movies that exist on multiple levels. Films that reward the audience with a deeper meaning each time they view it. Kingdom of Heaven, the Director's Cut is a good example of this. Because on the first viewing, you probably saw a serviceable follow-up to Gladiator by Ridley Scott. But what you might have missed is a film about the Crusades where God himself is interacting with the characters in human form to disincentivize them from continuing their ultimately pointless squabbling over a piece of land. There are numerous characters within the film constantly proclaiming that they speak for the will of God when God himself is speaking through seemingly normal people and saying quite the opposite. It's a powerful juxtaposition and one that you almost certainly missed if you've only seen the theatrical cut because that edit of the film is
hot garbage.
Okay, from a high level, The World's End is about 12 pints and 12 pubs. The Golden Mile, which is The First Post, The Old Familiar, The Famous Cock, The Cross Hands, The Good Companions, The Trusty Servant, The Two-Headed Dog, The Mermaid, The Beehive, The King's Head, The Hole in the Wall, and finally, The World's End. This film is a masterclass of direction, writing, acting, cinematography, the editing, my god, the editing, music selection, and overall filming a way to make something old seem new again. Insofar that the Cornetto trilogy up to this point were films engineered to send up existing movies and genres, whereas The World's End is something entirely new that isn't attempting to send up anything, other than your spirits, into the clouds, where happiness lives. And it's really goddamn funny. Something this review will probably fail to point out because I'm going to concentrate almost entirely on the structure and complexity of the narrative. Since this show is about pointing out things you might not have noticed in a particular movie, this is about to get insanely spoiler heavy. While I don't generally really care about spoilers because the movies are kind of old, this one's actually super new, that I am actually issuing the warning.
Spoiler warning.
If you have not yet seen this movie, it's probably best you turn this off and go rent or buy it.
Clockwork to Netflix.
It's not on Netflix.
Clockwork to the rental outlet of your choice.
Seriously, mega spoilers, you were warned. The World's End exists on a new level practically every time you watch it. I've seen it 6 times, so for the purposes of this review, we'll go down 6 levels. I'm sure there's tons more, and feel free to list them in the comments. On first viewing, it seems like a story about friends going home and realizing that home is not as they left it. The robots in the film are simply a metaphor for how the people we knew back when that have stayed in town since we left, somehow these people haven't changed. And it's to such a staggering degree that they appear as robots. They're a hive mind still going through the same motions that we remember. If you want to get super psychological about it, people are adept at seeing change within themselves, but much less likely to see it the further away from them people are. The psychology of social comparison says that in reality, actually these people have changed, only you're too much of a narcissist to have noticed. Of course, in this movie, the people of Newton Haven have not changed at all because, they're terrifying robots now. Which still actually manages to make the same point about the psychology of people because even though the people haven't changed in any way, they've actually changed in every way because they're not even humans anymore. Only when alcohol enters the picture do they actually begin to see that literally everything in the town has changed. And alcohol brings us to The World's End is also a film about addiction, a personal story, a heartbreaking story about Gary King, a character so accurate to this type of behavior that I imagine someone involved with the narrative has seen this disease up close. At the beginning of the film, Gary is in AA. He's devoid of friendship or meaningful relationships, or viewed through a far grimmer lens. He's simply run out of enablers.
Here is your friends, we're just your fucking enablers.
In the spur of the moment, he decides to get his high school group of friends back together to reclaim a lost glory known as the Golden Mile, which as far as I can tell isn't actually something that really exists in Newton Haven because no one ever seems to know what the hell he's talking about. We get our first look at the depths of Gary's addiction when, outside of the third bar, he drinks 3 half-empty beers from a table outside. To see how deep this goes, look at Gary's character from a different angle. Is he actually that dim, or is he constantly keeping a distance between himself and others so they're less likely to force him to get help because they don't love him enough? His friends even say that they're going to give up on him multiple times. We as the audience gain our sympathy for the character and our first true understanding of who Gary is when Andy finally gets the truth out of him. Andy has to trade his own truths to get us there,
It's all I got!
including the depths to which Gary has hurt their friendship by ditching Andy when he rushed him to the hospital and damn near ruined his life. The cuts are deep, and we can see that Gary continues to find new ways to punish himself for this. One of the central metaphors in play here is that having a friend with addiction sometimes feels like it destroys everything about your world. In this case, Gary's addiction literally destroys the entire world. Back to the belief that we never change. Sometime around the third viewing of the film, I realized that the movie makes a pretty reasonable argument that we don't actually change at all. Check out the opening 10 minutes again. Almost every single action in the original Golden Mile is mirrored in their second attempt, like to frightening degree. Starbucking, man.
Starbucking, man.
See, Patty Considine agrees with me.
Bought by chain on it.
Part of that nationwide initiative to rob small, charming pubs of any discernible character.
It's speaking against the idea of starbucking, or the idea that quaint mom-and-pop cafes, diners, bars, and restaurants get bought out by larger chains and are robbed of their character.
Like Guy Fieri teaming up with TGI Fridays.
There's a pretty clear belief among the group that the town actually used to be better because it wasn't yet invaded by all these chains. This is exemplified in the aliens themselves. They go from planet to planet, turning life forms into similar, predictable consistencies. While that may smooth out rough edges that come from identity, it's an assassination of character. The highest highs in our lives are valuable because they exist alongside the lowest lows. They even explain their entire plan with this reductive, manipulative infographic that would be right at home in pretty much any commercial.
Does this stock footage of people doing things on a beach put you at ease, even though it clearly has no bearing on reality whatsoever? The network. Say mahalo to being hollow.
The entire ethos of the aliens in this film reminds me of, and this is ironic considering Gary's situation, but it really does remind me of drugs like Lexapro.
Hey, stare at that wall just a little while longer. Lexapro.
By filing away all of our rough edges as people, we end up existing as this mediocre middle. Then compare this against the fact that Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz were send-ups and call-outs to existing films or genres, whereas The World's End is wholly its own beast. This movie is the mom-and-pop joint of the Cornetto trilogy, something that stands up wholly on its own. Hell, its main references are to its other movies. Around the fifth watching, this movie started blowing my mind in all these weird little nooks and crannies. There's so much you don't catch in plain sight. A lot of it is expertly buried within the comedy, so it's more rewarding when you actually catch it. Like here, Gary predicts the death of his two friends.
Anyway, 5 sounds much better. I think they missed the trick only having 3, because if they'd have 5, then 2 could have died and they still have 3 left.
Are we there yet?
You only need 3 musketeers. You don't need 5. Which is really funny to me because some news sites and movie blogs before the movie came out were actually questioning why there was 5 main characters in this film, saying it would be too crowded, which I just think is really funny. It was around this time I started to make the comparison in my head that Pierce Brosnan's character in this movie seems to resemble Timothy Dalton's character from Hot Fuzz, like in weird ways, visually and how he moves and talks. For a while I wasn't sure how intentional this was. And then I remembered that Pierce Brosnan followed Timothy Dalton in one of the most famous film characters of all time. This could obviously be intentional or not, but if Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Edgar Wright team up again, and there's a mentor/villain character that's played by Daniel Craig, then at that point we'll put a pin in this one. There are 12 pubs. There are also 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of the main takeaways of AA is surrendering yourself to a higher power to get the help that you need.
The network.
And oddly enough, the network tries to have an intervention with Gary, but it breaks one of the cardinal rules of having an intervention. Don't do it if the subject is not sober. Despite being the third movie in the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy, another popular nickname for the trilogy, it contains very little actual blood or ice cream. And we'll go one deeper. This point is actually higher for most people, but I believe coming to a full understanding of what the pub names actually foreshadow takes at least a few viewings. Like the opening of the film, the pub names themselves actually tell us what is about to happen, in order. Our heroes begin their journey. A post is a soldier's assignment, and seeing that every other one other than Gary was tricked into this, we accept that they were assigned to this journey. Besides being exactly the same as the first pub and is therefore familiar, this is when our 5 musketeers realize that the town is not how they left it. It is in fact not familiar. Gary believes that he is famous within Newton Haven, and he's a gigantic dick. So much so that the bartender remembers him, letting him know that he's still banned from the famous cock. The disjointed group comes together, crossing hands to fight a group of teenage robots. There's a lot of hands here. Gary in the past had already put his fist through the tile in the bathroom. He almost does it a second time, or I'm reaching on this one. He's crossed over his own path. Sorry. Yeah, cross hands, whatever. As an aside, Andy is still sober going into this pub. Being the 4th pub, he takes 5 shots, putting him 1 drink ahead for most of the rest of the movie. Now that Andy has joined their inebriated ranks, they have recessed into the group they used to be, the Good Companions. This entire pub is spent with humans explaining why they don't want to rock the boat. Andy has also regressed entirely back to his high school persona as Gary's trusty servant. The twins reveal their true form in glorious and terrifying boss fight mode, or this is a pretty widely held interpretation here. But are maybe Gary and Andy the two-headed dog, or is Gary himself the two-headed dog, oscillating between value and detriment to the group at large? This one is insanely clever because it drops a maddening amount of plot at breakneck speed, somehow eclipsing the obvious fact that these 3 women are sirens, women of the water, clouding the minds of the group. At this point, they've basically punched the beehive. They must then deal with all the bees, and as we know, every hive of bees has a queen. And I don't know who is the queen in this scenario. Is king bee or I don't really think the network is the queen. I don't know why I brought that up, because the network doesn't seem like a queen bee. It's Maya the bee. And as a loving aside, Nick Frost is a treasure. Both literal and figurative, Gary King does smash his head on the way to the bar. But we also see that his plan is now completely at odds with the rest of the group. He's committed to finishing the Golden Mile, but Andy and Steve aren't. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. And glory. And this last one is not technically in the pub, but Gary literally does rip off his own head. Probably doesn't need an in-depth analysis. Our journey comes to its conclusion. Andy and Gary have it out, and even once all their personal drama comes to the surface, Gary still opts to fill up his final drink on the Golden Mile. But he can't. The king no longer has access to his crown and glory. After meeting the network and hearing their reasonably effective timeshare pitch, Gary, Andy, and Steve piss off the leading superpower in the universe, dooming the human race to a second dark age, where the third flavor of Cornetto ice cream is just a memory. Huh, I wonder if there's a metaphor in there somewhere.